We're going to begin our tour by leaving the Visitor Center and going to the east, turning right on Mayfield Road. And the first building we're going to stop at is at the corner of 115th and Mayfield. It's the Cozad Bates House. Now I want you to go around with me to the back side of the house. What you see in the front is a wonderful Italianate residential structure from the 1870s, but in the back is a small two-story brick I-house from 1853. An I-house is a style you find in a lot of farms, one room deep, very simple residence. It's attached to the big house, and it predated it by 20 years. The Cozads and the Fords were abolitionists, and this house was standing at the time when the Underground Railroad was very active in the city of Cleveland, a city that was known on the Underground Railroad as the City of Hope. Its code name was Hope. This was a farmhouse surrounded by fields and orchards, and they're good accounts put together by the members of the Ford family who were active in the Underground Railroad at the time, about housing the fugitive slaves in this area and then taking them down at night on Euclid Avenue under bushels of hay through the gorge that's Dome Brook and down to the river, down to a barber's shop owned by an African American. Housing the fugitives there before they could get on boats from the harbor and go across to Canada. This is the last remnant of the pre-Civil War University Circle, and the building in front of it is one of the few residential structures that dates from the 1870s.
This is just a really great little neighborhood, and it's in good shape. It's just a kind of place where you can kind of walk to so many amenities. It's just a.
We talk about in new urbanism about front porch society.
Yeah. Well, this is old. This is old urbanism.
This is real urbanism.
This is what
urbanism without the driveway intercepting houses.
Well, right? This is exactly the kind of place that a lot of us now, after the modern era, are looking to learn about. Modern, or to learn about urban living.
I think it's also interesting to note that both the Cozad Bates House and 115th Street, and then there's a series of row houses on the other side, were threatened by the university hospitals because they wanted that land, and it was only the fight of the citizens and the Landmarks Commission and whatnot that was able to save it, and finally was able to be taken over by University Circle and saved from.
And that's really one of the big struggles in an institutional district, which grows into a neighborhood. Is what do you do with the existing residents? And for many years, the answer was buy them out and move them out. And I think both in Hessler and on 115th Street, you got a different model. Let's continue down 115th to Cornell, and what you see so striking in this whole area is the growth of university hospitals.
It's just that it's interesting that this short little street, the two ends, comparing the oldest house, University Circle, and that history, and then here, the cutting edge of modern healthcare, new construction. Just the juxtaposition.
And like all good hospitals, it continues to grow and change and expand. These are organizations that create enormous footprints, have an enormous employee base, and create great wealth. The challenge is, how do you balance that with the other competing influences and interests, neighborhood interests, the other competing institutions? And that's really the challenge that University Circle has and the city has, is to achieve that perfect balance. let's continue down Cornell to Euclid Avenue and turn left towards downtown. On the south side, you see again the growing campus of university hospitals, and to the north, the rather more sedate developments of the historic Case Western Reserve campus. Talk a little bit about the Church of the Covenant.
This was, I believe, designed by Ralph Adam Cram, who was at the time one of the leading church architects in the United States. And it has this somewhat spare, kind of northern Gothic, English Gothic feel to it. And it's has a wonderful organ, beautiful interior as well as exterior. And it's just a great little addition to the circle.
This is one of the historic churches, the Presbyterian Church. It's been a civic leader in many eras of Cleveland's history, the Civil Rights era, more recently, and it's a major draw, I think, from the region. People come back to the Church of the Covenant. As we continue down Euclid Avenue, there's a little gateway. What do you know about that?
Well, that's the Mary Chisholm Painter Memorial Arch, and it's this wonderful little Gothic folly. It has these great medallions, stone-carved medallions, life and knowledge, and is a real great pedestrian entryway into the campus off of Euclid Avenue, and I believe it was designed by Charles Schweinfurth.
Right. And right beyond that, further to the west, is the Student Union, which has an interesting history. It's starting out as the Excelsior Club.
The Excelsior Club was the Jewish social club at the early part of the century. Next to it, and facing the street, was the Hitchcock Hall for the university. So the concept was to take Hitchcock Hall and turn it 90 degrees so it became parallel to the Excelsior Club, and then bridge the distance between them with this glass pavilion.
And the Excelsior Club took on new life as Twing Hall. I
Right.
believe that was named for one of the university's early presidents, and now is a vital part of the campus.
And then restored the Excelsior Club to a wonderful ballroom upstairs, and the usual, the bookstore and the restaurant and the food opportunities and things like that, and just relaxation.
And the Excelsior Club was one of a number of clubs that were developed from about 1896, the latter part of the 19th century until about 1931. Club life was an important part of Cleveland until the Great Depression. As we continue along Euclid Avenue, looking at the investments that were made to create what is now known as the Health Line, the bus rapid transit system connecting Cleveland's two major employment centers, University Circle to the east and downtown Cleveland to the west, and opening up additional development, linking also University Circle with the abutting Cleveland Clinic campus to create a much more integrated institutional district and open up additional opportunities for institutional, I hope residential development along that corridor. We're going to get also to one of the more interesting and important buildings along Euclid Avenue. It's the Allen Memorial Library. It's a Walker and Weeks building, but built on, I believe, on the site of the Ford Farm. Again, the old families, which owned much of the land, over time sold or gave that land for many of the institutions that now occupy University Circle. Well, it's a wonderful little palace of a building, and one of the important libraries on the campus.
You know, I think it's really neat to see this beautiful Beaux-Arts building by Walker and Weeks right across the street from Severance also by Walker and Weeks, which is Beaux-Art, but more kind of an Art Deco version of it.
It's the best Art Deco
With
interior we have.
Those Egyptian Revival capitals and that highly figurative marble in the interior columns. It's quite spectacular.
In fact, I'd say it's probably the best interior Cleveland has.
I would agree. It's certainly the most detailed. And wasn't Severance renovated and expanded a number of years ago?
Just about 7 or 8 years ago, and the entire inside of the performance space was redone.
And adding to the rest of the building, they did something that a lot of buildings of that era need to address, and that is the back door became the front door. When Severance was developed in the early 1930s, you either came by streetcar and walked up the big steps in the front, or you came by limousine through a passageway now converted to usable space, to a lobby. But as time passed and people drove themselves to Severance, they'd come in the back door through the same areas that the musicians were trying to get on stage and with the box office. And it was very clear that
was the parking lot.
That was the parking lot. Now that's a parking garage. We're going to walk down Adelbert Road and then back through a bit of the campus, but then back through a diagonal that was built on the site of a fairly ordinary modernist classroom building, Newton D. Baker. A diagonal that connects the southern campus, the south campus, with the north campus.
What I think is really neat about the diagonal walk is it was designed by a student. There was a design competition, maybe 2005, 2006, and many things were submitted. You had to be a student or affiliated with the university to submit a design. Well, Adelbert is the old Main. I mean, that's the original building.
That's the Adelbert building. The
Adelbert Main,
right,
as it's called.
What I think is it's an interesting building, and but what I think is most significant about it is that it was the site of the Michelson-Morley experiment, which proved that the speed of light is the same in all directions, regardless of the motion of the Earth, which ultimately laid the groundwork for Einstein's relativity just a few years later.
Let's walk around Old Main and we see also the massive stone chapel, which was built in 1910. It's a Gothic revival by architect Henry Vaughan. What can we say about that?
It's space, opening up the campus to Euclid Avenue in that area, and serves as a foil for Crawford Hall on the corner.
Right, that very modern building,
very modern tower, which is the new headquarters of the university. The most wonderful thing about Crawford Hall for me is what's up on the roof.
And what's that?
It is a sculpture by Dale Eldred, again recognized in honor of the centenary of the Michelson-Morley thing, which is using prismatic refraction on planar surfaces, reacting to the sun and changing color as the sun or the sky changes.
When I was growing up, I always thought that University Circle was the Wade Oval Drive, but I was wrong. The University Circle was a no longer extant circle where Euclid bends, where it turns kind of northeast, and that was the last streetcar stop. And I believe a little piece of that physical circle is still existing right by the Children's Museum.
Exactly.
But basically, it's been superseded by just the bend in Euclid Avenue, and you could take the streetcar out to the university, and that was the last stop.
That was how you were supposed to experience it, getting off there, coming down from the Heights, or coming from East Cleveland, from Euclid, or from downtown, and arriving and experiencing the lagoon, coming in the front door of Severance, coming in the front door of the Art Museum, because you walked.
Yeah.
This was a day when this was in fact a streetcar community.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about this wonderful lagoon. It wasn't always a wonderful lagoon.
No, it most certainly wasn't. It was a mud hole where mosquitoes and other things bred, so it was a source of illness to people at one point. But Cozad felt that a park was needed for this part of town, and decided and came up with the idea of developing a park. The mud hole became Wade Lagoon, and with a fountain and boating and whatnot. And that, I believe, then upon the creation of the Cleveland Museum of Art, became the Fine Arts Garden.
As we go through those main front stairs, that very grand descent, I love that the way that it presents itself to you. And when you go down those steps, suddenly there's a hush that kind of surrounds the lagoon. It's so noisy with the street traffic and everything, and I'm sure it was in 1916 as well. And this, you're immediately removed from that daily hustle, and it really invites you.
Sort of goes over.
It just goes over, and it invites you to stroll, take your time, and it also gives you the opportunity to then ascend again to the temple of the Art Museum at the other end. This was a Hubble and Venice building. It's 1916, and it's done in a very spare Greek Revival, Beaux-Arts style, and it's a very, very well done building. There are a lot of subtleties to this building that I think make it work. The proportions are very consistent throughout, and the marble is just allowed to express its own grain and just its own character. It's thoughtfully ornamented, but not overly ornamented. So you have these wonderful, long, clean walls of marble, and these just little kind of pavilion pediments and porticos. It's a very well done building.
Let's walk around the museum, coming up past the zodiac sculptures and the fountain, to the east end of the addition that Vignoli has put on, facing the challenges of merging the designs of Breuer's addition and the original Hubble-Venice building to the north face of that. And what do we see there?
Well, the Marcel Breuer addition from 1970, I think was a little controversial when it was built. May be an understatement, but it's a highly intelligently executed addition to this building. It's obviously a very different style. It's a very robust, modern building, and has a character that you immediately recognize as of a different era.
The Hubble in Venice was a masterpiece, and it needed to be recreated and seen as its whole. And then we could bring around it. You could always see that wall of marble in full. It was masterful. And the fact that whole south end, and I think it's going to be mirrored on the other side, is all glass. Not just that, but then the end wall, gives it a marvelous transparency, which again modulates between the wing and the basis of the.
This will be the first time since the 1940s that anyone will see the whole north facade of that building.
This is really the park that Jephthah Wade and I think it was Samuel Cozad had in mind, really, and in many ways. It's a great civic space. It's a great gathering place for the community. The most impressive is the Parade the Circle event in June. But I believe during the summer now, there are regular concerts and events that draw people in, not only from the university community, but from throughout this part of the greater Cleveland.
I think the key thing is Jeff Thruway's purpose, not only to create the park, but have that as a center around which the cultural institutions would gather. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what has happened, and that's what makes it so vital.
One of the newer additions, frankly, was the Natural History Museum, which I believe was downtown at one point in a house near what is now the Cleveland State campus.
Cleveland Museum of Natural History has a rather unassuming building right now. Of course, it has the Chaffron Planetarium, which is quite cool and stands out. But this is a really important institution. They've probably done more for the science of paleoanthropology than any other institution in the country. And you wouldn't necessarily know it walking past, but they are embarking on a master plan and a new facility in the next few years that I think is going to be really, really exciting.
If we looked west, past the museum, you see another major institution of that area, and that is the temple, as it's called.
That's right. That's the dome you see in the distance from that promontory, right?
Right. Done by Charles Greco in 1916. Probably the major piece of Jewish architecture in the city, and fortunately being saved for a new life now. Very exciting. So it still will be a Jewish institution, but can also be part of the university as a cultural center.
I think that's a really neat church stylistically, because it's got those Gothic roots, but it's very Americanized. You know, it's this sort of almost prairie Gothic, very tough-looking, really cool church. And
with the moniker that came out of it is the oil can.
The Holy Oil Can, yeah.
Oil
well, both of these churches presented major architectural challenges, being on triangular sites. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you look at the temple, Epworth and Severance, they're all sites that where the architect had to work around triangular land masses and create a major statement. Up to the northwest, towards the lake, is Rockefeller Park, the cultural gardens, and a whole rich ensemble of landscape features that can be reached simply by going down the hill and into the park that way, and across also this zone here is the future campus of Case Western Reserve, a medical research campus is being proposed there.
One of the great things about the cultural gardens is that it continues to grow. There's always new pavilions being erected, and different designs, contemporary and older, living side by side. I think that's a really...
And many of the gardens have been restored. The Italian Cultural Garden is in the process of being restored and upgraded. And there are new gardens like the Armenian, the Indian Garden, that have been added to a rich history dating to the 1920s. Let's turn right on Bellflower to get into the historic core of the Western Reserve campus that has some wonderful features.
Yeah, this is a really special outdoor gathering place and a great public space. Where there's a great collection of buildings there with Hayden Hall and the Harkness Chapel and a couple of others. The Athena Taka sculpture that's very popular. But I'd like to focus on one in particular, which is Clark Hall, which is easily overlooked. I think this is an exquisite little gem of a building. If you get to walk past this, take a look at the detailing. Look at the mortar joints, the way the brick is laid up, the window heads and sills and jambs. This is a really, really terrific little building that merits attention, I think. If you, as you walk past that, if you sort of go to the left between Clark Hall and Harkness Chapel, there's a little walkway that you'll find there, and there's a little cobblestone seating area plaza with some trees, which is quite pleasant. And there's a great pedestrian connection that will take us back to Euclid Avenue.
As you're coming back to the visitor center, take a look down Euclid Avenue. This stretch of Euclid from Ford all the way to the 120th Street Rapid Station is undergoing a significant transformation. In the distance, you can see the one of the original Ford motor factories that the Cleveland Institute of Art converted to the McCullough Center some years ago. That is the first big investment by one of the cultural institutions.
That's a really neat building. You know, the history obviously tied into Cleveland's manufacturing heritage, and then now part of our, you know, whatever we want to call new economy or creative economy.
That's really the outrider of what is going to be several blocks of major reinvestment that's on the boards, which brings the Museum of Contemporary Art to this corner, and further development of the Cleveland Institute of Art.
Right.
This is perhaps the wave of the future as we look to bringing back a residential presence, a commercial presence, a neighborhood presence, tying together the remnants of neighborhood on Hessler and 115th, the multi-story apartments that were built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, with a new community that pulls it all together. It'd be really quite exciting work that is being done by the Marin family and other developers to create a new place in University Circle.